The clinking of silver forks stopped. Conversations at nearby tables died down. A waiter carrying a tray of red wine glasses froze between two booths. I looked across the table at Brad. He leaned back in his leather chair. His navy suit was pressed. His eyes were cold. Next to him sat our 9-year-old daughter, Chloe. Her little fingers clutched a coloring crayon. Her eyes darted from her father to me. "You were never a real wife," Brad said. His voice was loud. It echoed off the high timber beams of Cooper's Hawk Winery. "You're just a sadistic, controlling machine." The air in my lungs turned to ice. The rich smell of roasted garlic and prime rib suddenly made me sick. Brad did not whisper it. He did not say it in anger behind our bedroom door. He said it for the entire dining room to hear. He wanted me small. He wanted me broken. He wanted everyone to see me bleed. My mother, Helen, sat to my left. Her hands trembled as she set her water glass down. The ice cubes clinked against the crystal. 8 years ago, my father died. Since then, I have carried everything. I carried my mother's grief. I carried my daughter's future. I carried my husband's endless debts. But tonight, in front of 15 family members and dozens of strangers, Brad decided to tear my dignity to shreds. I looked at my linen napkin. I folded it into a neat square. I laid it beside my untouched slice of birthday cake. Then I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound was sharp. "If I am invisible to you," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "then learn to live without me." I picked up my purse. I turned my back on the staring eyes. I walked through the dining room and stepped into the warm June evening of Carmel, Indiana. The heavy glass doors shut behind me, cutting off the noise. The keys to the silver SUV were cold in my palm. I unlocked the doors. The headlights flashed in the dark. I climbed inside, turned the ignition, and drove away. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Brad's name lit up the screen. "Bring my car back, or I'm calling the cops." I read the text at a red light on East 146th Street. I locked the screen. I never replied. People often ask me if that public humiliation was the moment my marriage died. The truth is, my marriage had been dying for years under the quiet weight of my own silent sacrifices, long before that fateful night at the restaurant. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am 38 years old. I am a self-employed tax accountant. Numbers have always made sense to me. They are clean. They are honest. If you add 2 and 2, the answer is always 4. Numbers do not lie. People do, especially the people you love. For 10 years, I worked from a small desk in the corner of our spare bedroom. I spent 12 hours a day staring at spreadsheet grids, calculating tax deductions, and filing returns for local small businesses. My back ached. My eyes burned from the blue light of the monitor. But I never complained. I told myself I was building a life for my family. When Brad lost his position at a major dealership 5 years ago, I covered the mortgage. When he wanted to start his own independent sales consulting firm, I cleared his credit card debts. When the transmission blew on his truck, I bought the silver SUV using my own savings. I put the title in my name, but I handed him the keys. He kissed my cheek that day. "I'll pay you back, Sarah," he had whispered. "Family helps family." I smiled and told him there was plenty of time. There was never plenty of time. My generosity did not earn his respect. It earned his contempt. Every check I wrote made him feel smaller, so he made me pay for it in other ways. He stopped asking about my work. He stopped looking at me when I entered the room. He stopped calling me by my name. He used subtle, cold words to trim away my confidence. "You're wearing that sweater again," he would ask with a slight smirk. "It must be nice to sit in an air-conditioned room all day while I'm out in the heat." The cold violence was quiet. It left no bruises. It left no broken bones. It just eroded my soul, drop by drop, until I felt like a ghost in my own house. The birthday dinner was supposed to be a celebration. I had organized it for my 38th birthday. I invited my mother, my cousins, and a few close clients who had become friends. The first hour was pleasant. The bread was warm. The wine was sweet. Chloe proudly showed everyone the blue ribbon she had won at her school science fair. Then Brad leaned across the white tablecloth. He swirled his glass of Cabernet. His eyes had that familiar, hungry glint. "So, Helen," Brad said, looking at my mother, "have you decided when you're going to transfer the deed of the lake house into our name? Estate planning saves everyone a headache." My mother froze. The lake house was held inside the Jenkins family trust. My late father had created it to ensure my mother and I would always have a roof over our heads. It was not a toy. It was not a bargaining chip. "Brad," I said gently, trying to soften the tension, "this isn't the place for that discussion." Brad's smile vanished. He set his glass down hard. Red wine splashed onto the white cloth, staining it like a drop of fresh blood. "I'm just talking about our future, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "If you helped us refinance the property now, I could secure the capital I need for my new showroom inventory. Unless, of course, you want to keep holding the purse strings." "I have already helped quite a bit," I replied quietly. "Family helps family," Brad sneered. "What's one more signature?" "No," I said. I did not yell. I just looked him in the eye. "No, Brad." That was the moment the mask slipped. That was the moment he realized he could no longer bleed me dry. That was the moment he decided to destroy me in front of everyone we knew. I reached my house 20 minutes later. I parked the silver SUV in the driveway. I turned off the engine. The garage was pitch black. The silence inside the car was heavy. My hands began to shake on the steering wheel. Hot tears finally spilled over my eyelashes and dripped onto my lap. I was not crying because my husband had insulted me. I was crying because I realized something terrible. For 10 years, I had taught my husband that my love was free, my boundaries were non-existent, and my self-respect was for sale. I sat in the dark, listening to the metallic pinging of the cooling engine. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was pale, exhausted, and bruised in spirit. But deep beneath the pain, a cold, quiet flame sparked in my chest. I reached out and locked the car doors from the inside. I looked down at my hands. They were the hands of a woman who knew how to balance a ledger. And it was time to audit my life. The hum of the coffee maker was the only sound in the house. It was 5 a.m. on Saturday. The sky outside my kitchen window was a flat, dull gray. The damp smell of morning mist drifted through the back door screen. My knees ached. My eyes were raw from a sleepless night. But my mind was sharp. For 10 years, I had let emotion blur my judgment. No more. I sat down at the small wooden desk in the corner of my home office. The air smelled of cold coffee and old paper. I opened my laptop. The blue light illuminated my face. I logged into my tax accounting software and pulled up my personal banking portals. I opened a fresh, blank spreadsheet. Numbers do not hold grudges. Numbers do not scream in restaurants. They simply state the cold, hard truth. I began to dig. I traced every electronic transfer, every debit card charge, and every check written over the last 5 years. My fingers moved across the keyboard in a steady rhythm. Click, clack, click. The reality hit me like a splash of ice water. There were hundreds of small, scattered transactions. A transfer of $200 here. A payment of $500 there. A lump sum of $2,000 to clear a temporary shortfall. Over 5 years, those tiny drops of generosity had created a massive river. I added up the total column. The number burned on the screen, $124,850. I stared at the figures. That was my sweat. Those were my late nights. That was the money meant for my daughter's future. I had spent over $100,000 saving a man who was actively drowning himself in online sports gambling. Every check I wrote had not saved him. It had only funded his addiction and fed his arrogance. I was not his savior. I was his enabler. I was the primary manufacturer of my own misery. My phone buzzed against the wooden desk. The harsh vibration rattled my coffee mug. It was a text from Chloe's phone. "I miss you, Mommy. Can I come home?" My heart squeezed tightly in my chest. Tears pricked my eyes. But before I could type a reply, the screen blinked. The message vanished. Brad sent a message. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Brad had taken the phone out of our 9-year-old daughter's hands. He was using our child as a weapon. He was filtering her words to punish me. He wanted me desperately. He wanted me back on my knees. I set the phone face down on the desk. I took a slow, deep breath. I refused to let him use my daughter to break my resolve. Adults can survive ugly words. Children should never be dragged into the mud of adult wars. At 9 a.m., I picked up my leather handbag and drove to downtown Carmel. The office of Vance Family Law sat on the 3rd floor of a brick building on Main Street. The air inside smelled of polished oak, expensive leather, and clean linen. Victoria Vance stood up from behind her broad walnut desk. She was 40 years old, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit. Her eyes were warm, but her posture was pure steel. We had known each other since college. "You look exhausted, Sarah," Victoria said softly, sliding a glass of iced water toward me. "I am," I said, sitting down. "But I am also done." I opened my folder and laid out my printed spreadsheets. I told her everything. I told her about the public insult at Cooper's Hawk. I told her about the deleted text from Chloe. I told her about the $124,000 drain from my accounts. Victoria listened without interrupting. She took notes with a fountain pen. The black ink dried quickly on the white legal pad. When I finished, Victoria leaned back in her leather chair. She opened a thick beige file cabinet behind her. She pulled out a folder stamped with gold foil, Jenkins Family Trust. She laid the documents on the glass table between us. "Sarah, we need to clarify your legal position," Victoria said, pointing her pen at the deed. 8 years ago, after your father passed away, your mother placed the family home into the Jenkins Family Trust. You are a co-trustee. "Brad thinks we own it," I said softly. "He thinks he has a right to equity." "Brad is wrong," Victoria stated firmly. Her voice left no room for doubt. "Occupancy is not ownership. Your mother allowed you to live there to protect you. Brad's name is nowhere on this deed. He has zero legal claim to that property. He has zero right to demand a refinance." I looked at the black signatures on the heavy cream paper. The truth was sitting right in front of me, wrapped in legal seals. I had spent years protecting Brad from the consequences of his bad choices. In doing so, I had created a monster who believed he owned everything I built. Victoria slid a single document across the table. "This is a formal authorization to revoke his occupancy rights and reclaim your personal assets," Victoria said quietly. "Are you ready to stop disappearing, Sarah?" I looked at the document. My hand did not shake. I picked up the pen. The blue ink flowed smoothly onto the paper as I signed my name. "I am ready," I said. I walked out of the office into the bright morning air. The wind blew cold against my face. I unbuttoned my faded, oversized sweater, the one Brad always mocked, and pulled it off. I tossed it into the back seat of my car. I stood tall in my fitted white blouse. I adjusted my rearview mirror, looked myself in the eyes, and made a silent promise. The era of my silent sacrifice was over. Monday morning arrived with a blinding white sun. The heat radiated off the black asphalt of the luxury auto showroom. The air smelled of burnt rubber, hot tar, and car wax. It was 10 a.m. I parked 2 blocks away in a rented sedan. I rolled the window down. I listened. Brad stood on the showroom floor. Through the glass walls, I saw his crisp white shirt. His teeth flashed in a practiced smile. He held a clipboard, pitching a sale to an older couple. He looked untouchable. Then, the heavy diesel engine roared. A massive flatbed tow truck turned into the dealership lot. Its brakes squealed loudly. Flashing yellow strobe lights cut through the glaring sunlight. The truck stopped in front of the main glass doors. It backed up toward the silver SUV. The SUV belonged to me. The title bore my name. The payments came from my bank. But for 3 years, Brad had called it his own. Not anymore. The tow truck driver jumped out. His heavy steel-toed boots crunched loudly on the gravel. He pulled a thick metal chain from the flatbed. The steel links clanked together. The sound was sharp, metallic, and heavy. He hooked the chain to the front axle of the SUV. The hydraulic winch began to whine. Inside the showroom, Brad dropped his clipboard. Papers scattered across the polished tile floor. He ran out the glass doors. His face flushed bright red. The veins in his neck bulged. "Hey, stop!" Brad screamed. "What the hell are you doing? That is my car." The driver did not flinch. He wiped grease from his hands with a dirty rag. He pulled a yellow clipboard from his belt. "The vehicle is registered to Sarah Jenkins," the driver said. His voice was flat. "I have a legal repossession order. Step back, sir." "I am her husband," Brad yelled. He lunged toward the chain. "Drop the truck. I am calling the cops." "Go ahead," the driver replied. He pressed a black button. The hydraulic motor growled. The silver SUV lifted into the air. Brad pulled his phone from his pocket. His hands shook wildly. He dialed 911. A crowd gathered. The older couple stepped out of the showroom. 3 salesmen walked into the lot. The manager stood by the door. The silence was deafening. They watched Brad unravel. 5 minutes later, a Carmel police cruiser pulled into the lot. The siren chirped once. The red and blue lights spun, casting harsh colors across the silver cars. A tall police officer stepped out. His duty belt creaked. The air smelled of starch and leather. Brad ran toward him, pointing wildly at the tow truck. "He is stealing my car. Arrest him." Brad shouted. Spit flew from his lips. The officer held up a calm, gloved hand. He walked over to the tow driver. The driver handed him the clipboard. The officer read the papers. He checked the VIN number on the dashboard. He handed the clipboard back. The officer turned to Brad. His expression was stern. "This is a civil matter, sir," the officer said loudly. Everyone heard him. "The paperwork is clean. The vehicle does not belong to you. Step away from the truck." Brad froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His shoulders slumped. The illusion of his power shattered. The tow truck engine roared to life. The massive tires crunched over the asphalt. The truck pulled out into the street, taking the SUV with it. Brad stood alone in the empty space. His boss stared at him. His coworkers whispered. The humiliation hung in the hot air. It was inescapable. Before Brad could move, a man in a beige trench coat walked up the driveway. He carried a thick manila envelope. The man stopped right in front of Brad. "Brad Miller?" the man asked. Brad blinked, confused. "Yes." The man shoved the envelope into Brad's chest. "You have been served." The process server turned and walked away. Brad ripped the envelope open. The jagged edge of the paper cut his thumb. A drop of red blood smeared across the white document. It was a formal notice to vacate. He had 30 days to leave the Jenkins family trust property. If he stayed, he would be forcibly removed. I watched him stare at the paper. I felt a cold, clean wave of justice. I rolled up my window. I drove home. By noon, my phone began to vibrate. It buzzed against the kitchen counter like an angry hornet. "You crazy bitch. You humiliated me. You ruined this family." The texts fired rapidly. The screen flashed over and over. A week ago, those words would have made me cry. My heart would have been hammered in my chest. I would have apologized. I picked up the phone. My pulse was slow and steady. The screen felt cold against my palm. I read every angry word. I looked up. A framed photograph of Brad sat on the fireplace mantel. In the picture, he was smiling. It was the smile he used to charm strangers. It was the smile he used to drain my bank accounts. I walked over to the mantel. I picked up the silver frame. The metal was heavy. I simply unhooked the back, pulled his picture out, and dropped it into a black trash bag. The house was incredibly quiet. The space felt lighter. I walked to the large bay window in the living room. I unlocked the brass latch. I pushed the heavy glass pane up. A sudden rush of autumn air blew into the room. It smelled of dry maple leaves, damp earth, and rain. The stale, suffocating air of the past 10 years was swept away. I picked up a small, vibrant green fern from the coffee table. The leaves were soft and alive. I placed the terracotta pot gently on the wooden windowsill. The green leaves fluttered in the fresh wind. The house finally belonged to me. The conference room sat on the 12th floor of a glass tower in downtown Indianapolis. High above the street, the city looked small. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The room smelled of fresh lavender, hot espresso, and crisp paper. A long walnut table occupied the center of the room. 8 leather chairs sat neatly around it. Brad was already sitting across the table when Victoria and I walked in. He wore a tailor-made navy suit. His hair was slicked back. His gold watch glinted under the recessed lights. Beside him sat his attorney, a young man with a thin mustache named Eric. Brad leaned back in his chair. He tapped his pen against the polished wood. Tap, tap, tap. His face wore a smirking grin. He thought he was in control. He thought this was just another game he could win with charm and threats. I sat down calmly. Victoria sat beside me. She opened a heavy black leather briefcase. She pulled out 2 thick binders and laid them flat on the glass table. The click of the metal clasps echoed in the quiet room. The mediator, a white-haired retired judge named Arthur Vance, took his seat at the head of the table. He adjusted his silver spectacles. "We are here today to resolve the property division and spousal support demands filed by Mr. Brad Miller," Arthur said softly. "Let us keep this civil." Brad's lawyer, Eric, cleared his throat. He smoothed his tie. "My client has devoted 10 years to this marriage," Eric began, his voice practiced and smooth. "He contributed to the upkeep of the marital residence. He helped build the family equity. We are requesting a 50% division of the home's current market value, along with 3 years of spousal maintenance while Mr. Miller rebuilds his business." Brad nodded dramatically. He looked at Arthur. "I sacrificed everything for my family," Brad said, his voice dripping with false emotion. "Sarah controlled all the money. She shut me out. I just want what is fair." I did not flinch. I did not yell. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My pulse remained steady. Victoria leaned forward. She placed her forearms on the table. Her expression was pure ice. "That is a very touching story, Eric," Victoria said calmly. Unfortunately for your client, stories do not hold up in court. Facts do. Victoria flipped open the first thick binder. The heavy pages rustled loudly. First, the residence, Victoria said. She slid a certified document across the table. The property at 1412 Maple Drive is owned entirely by the Jenkins Family Trust. It was purchased with cash 12 years ago by Sarah's late father. Brad Miller's name appears nowhere on the deed. He is a guest. Occupancy does not equal equity. Under Indiana law, trust assets created prior to marriage with non-marital funds are completely exempt from marital distribution. Eric picked up the paper. He read it quickly. His eyebrows twitched. He leaned over and whispered into Brad's ear. Brad's smirk faded slightly, but he shrugged his shoulders. Fine, Brad muttered, his jaw tightening. She still owes me for my business losses. She promised to back my venture. Victoria smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the sharp grin of a prosecutor. Let us talk about your business, Brad, Victoria said. She opened the second binder. Or rather, let us talk about where Sarah's money actually went. Victoria pulled out a stack of financial statements. She slid them into the center of the table. The white sheets covered the polished walnut wood. These are audited bank records from the last 5 years, Victoria stated, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. Over $120,000 was transferred from Sarah's personal accounts to cover what Mr. Miller claimed were business expenses. However, forensic accounting reveals these funds were routed directly into 3 offshore online sports gambling platforms. Arthur, the mediator, leaned forward. He picked up the bank statements. He scanned the red, highlighted rows. He frowned deeply. Brad's face turned pale. The gold watch on his wrist suddenly looked heavy. That was exploratory investment, Brad stammered. His voice lost its smooth polish. It was market research. It was illegal sports betting, Victoria corrected coldly. And it gets worse. The air in the room grew heavy. The hum of the air conditioner overhead seemed to fade away. Victoria reached into her briefcase one last time. She pulled out a thin, blue folder. She did not slide it. She placed it right in front of Brad. 3 months ago, Victoria said, every word slow and measured, an application for an $80,000 home equity loan was submitted to Indiana First Bank. The application claimed the property belonged to Brad Miller. It contained 2 signatures authorizing a lien against the Jenkins Family Trust. I looked at Brad. All the color drained from his face. His skin turned a sickly gray. His hands began to tremble. The signatures belonged to Sarah Jenkins and her mother, Helen Jenkins. Victoria continued. Except Sarah was out of town on that date, and Helen was in the hospital recovering from hip surgery. Victoria pulled out an official document stamped with a red seal. This is a certified report from a certified handwriting expert, Victoria declared. Both signatures are complete, deliberate forgeries. Silence crashed over the conference room. It was absolute. Nobody breathed. Even Eric, Brad's lawyer, pulled his hands away from the papers as if they were on fire. You can't prove that, Brad whispered. His voice was barely an audible squeak. Sweat broke out across his forehead, shining under the fluorescent lights. We do not need to prove it to you, Brad, Victoria said softly. She leaned across the table, looking directly into his terrified eyes. Forgery on a financial institution loan application is a level 6 felony in the state of Indiana. Bank fraud is a federal crime. The evidence is complete. The handwriting analysis is bulletproof. The criminal complaint is drafted and sitting on my desk. Brad turned to his lawyer. Eric, say something. Tell her she can't do this. Eric looked at the handwriting report. He looked at the bank loan application. He slowly closed his notebook. He leaned toward Brad and spoke in a harsh whisper that carried across the quiet room. "Shut up, Brad," Eric snapped. "Just shut up." Eric turned to Victoria. His confidence was completely gone. "What are your terms?" Victoria pulled out a final, thin document. She laid a black fountain pen beside it. "Here is the settlement," Victoria said. "Brad signs a full waiver of all claims to any marital property, trust assets, or spousal support. Brad takes sole, exclusive liability for the $80,000 in gambling debts and fraudulent loans. Brad consents to full custody of Chloe for Sarah, with supervised visitation at Sarah's discretion. In exchange, Sarah agrees not to forward this felony file to the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office." Victoria checked her watch. "You have 24 hours to sign," Victoria added. "If the sun rises tomorrow without your signature on this paper, the police will be at your door." Brad sat frozen. The arrogant man who had humiliated me in front of a crowded restaurant was gone. The man who had taken my daughter's phone was gone. In his place sat a small, broken, terrified liar. He looked at the black pen. He looked at the document. His hand shook violently as he reached out. His fingers clutched the pen. The metal nib scratched against the heavy paper. His signature was messy, jagged, and weak. He pushed the paper back across the table. He did not look at Victoria. He did not look at his lawyer. He slowly lifted his eyes and looked at me. For 10 years, I had looked at him with fear, with longing, and with desperate hope. Today, I looked at him and felt nothing. No anger, no hatred, just a vast, quiet emptiness. Brad stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He walked out of the conference room. His head was bowed. His shoulders were slumped. The glass doors shut behind him with a soft click. I sat in the high tower overlooking the city. I placed my hand over my chest. I felt my heart beating. It was slow. It was steady. It was strong. The heavy iron chains I had carried for a decade snapped and fell away. I took a deep, full breath. My lungs filled with clean air. I was free. 8 months passed like water over river stones. The sharp edge of winter softened into the green warmth of late spring in Noblesville, Indiana. The air smelled of blooming lilac, fresh lawn cuttings, and wet morning soil. My life looked completely different. The transformation was not an accident. It was built day by day, choice by choice. I stopped looking back. I stopped asking why Brad had hurt me. I took full responsibility for my own happiness. I shifted my mindset from a helpless victim to the architect of my future. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., I rolled out a purple mat on the oak floor of my living room. I practiced yoga. I stretched my hamstrings. I breathed deeply. I felt the strength in my core. My body grew lean, firm, and energized. The dull ache in my back vanished. My skin lost its pale, tired gray hue. A healthy, rosy glow returned to my cheeks. I enrolled in an advanced, certified management accountant program. Every evening after Chloe went to bed, I studied advanced financial strategy. The crisp, white textbook pages rustled under my desk lamp. My highlighter left bright, yellow tracks across complex equations. I passed my certification exams with honors. I rebranded my business. I moved out of the dark corner of my bedroom. I leased a small, sunlit office on Logan Street in downtown Noblesville. The room had exposed brick walls, big glass windows, and a shiny hardwood floor. It smelled of polished pine and fresh coffee. I hung a wooden sign on the door, Jenkins Tax and Wealth Advisory. Clients came. They saw a sharp, confident woman who knew how to protect their money. My client roster doubled in 6 months. I updated my wardrobe. I threw away the baggy, faded sweaters Brad had used to keep me invisible. I bought structured navy blazers tailored white trousers, and comfortable leather heels. When I walked down the street, my heels clicked loudly against the pavement. The sound was crisp. The sound was proud. My home became a sanctuary of peace. There were no raised voices. There were no tense silences. The house smelled of lemon furniture polish and warm cinnamon. Chloe thrived. The anxiety that used to make her chew her fingernails disappeared. Her laughter rang through the hallway like silver bells. We spent hours together. On Saturday afternoons, we baked blueberry pies in the kitchen. Flour dusted our noses. The oven radiated cozy warmth. The sweet smell of boiling fruit filled the house. While the pie baked, Chloe and I worked in the backyard garden. The damp soil felt cool under our bare hands. We dug small holes. We planted heirloom tomato seedlings and sweet basil. "Mommy," Chloe asked one afternoon, wiping sweat from her forehead with her sleeve, "are you happier now?" I stopped digging. I looked at my daughter. Her dark eyes were bright and clear. "I am, sweetie," I said softly. "Is it because Daddy left?" she whispered. I took her small, soil-covered hand in mine. I squeezed it gently. I never spoke ill of Brad to her. I never used my daughter to fight my old battles. "It is because I learned to stand up for myself," I told her clearly. "It is because I learned that love should never hurt, and I want you to remember that when you grow up." Chloe smiled. She nodded. "Love should make you feel safe." "Yes," I replied. "Exactly." A week later, my mother Helen and I drove the silver SUV to a local auto dealership. The car had been a symbol of Brad's greed for 3 years. Every time I looked at it, I saw his entitlement. It was time to close that chapter completely. The dealership manager wrote a check for the full market value. I held the paper in my hand. The black ink felt like a final victory. Helen and I walked straight into the Indiana First Bank on 10th Street. The air inside was cool and quiet. We met with a financial advisor. We deposited every dollar from the car sale directly into a brand new account, the Chloe Miller 529 College Savings Plan. I signed the deposit slip. Helen signed as the secondary trustee. We were building a fortress around Chloe's future, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. No one could ever touch it. No one could ever steal it. "Your father would be so proud of you, Sarah," Helen whispered as we walked out into the afternoon sun. She held my arm tightly. Her eyes were moist with happy tears. I looked up at the clear blue sky. "I am proud of myself too, Mom." That evening, I got ready for a dinner celebrating my new business office opening. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom. The evening sun cast a warm, golden light across the room. I wore a tailored emerald green suit jacket over a cream silk blouse. My dark hair was styled in soft, glossy waves that brushed my shoulders. My makeup was light, highlighting my clear eyes and strong jawline. I looked at the woman in the glass. I did not see the tired, invisible wife who had wept in a dark SUV 8 months ago. I did not see the woman who allowed herself to be walked on. I saw a survivor. I saw a professional. I saw a mother who had fought for her freedom and won. A gentle smile broke across my face. It was not a fake smile for a client. It was not a nervous smile to keep the peace. It was a real, radiant smile that reached all the way to my soul. I smoothed the lapels of my green jacket. I adjusted my gold earrings. I took a deep, steady breath, picked up my leather clutch, and walked out the door to meet my destiny. October arrived in Indiana, painting the oak trees in vibrant shades of gold, amber, and deep crimson. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, honey-colored light across the backyard garden. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the earthy scent of dry fallen leaves, damp soil, and sweet wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. It was the golden hour. Chloe ran across the green lawn, her bright yellow cardigan fluttering in the cool breeze. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the autumn wind. She carried a woven wicker basket filled with ripe heirloom tomatoes and fresh yellow chrysanthemums we had grown together. "Look, Mommy," Chloe called out. Her voice was light and cheerful, ringing across the yard like a silver bell. "The tomatoes are huge this year." I smiled, setting down my pair of iron garden shears on the wooden porch bench. My mother, Helen, sat nearby in a white rocking chair, wrapped in a soft wool blanket. She watched us with a calm, gentle expression. The peace in our yard was tangible. It felt like a warm, protective blanket resting over our home. My phone vibrated softly in my jacket pocket. It was not a harsh, buzzing hornet like the old days. It was a single, discreet chime. I pulled out the device. I opened an email from my attorney, Victoria Vance. Attached was an official PDF document bearing the raised gold seal of the Hamilton County Circuit Court. It was the final decree of dissolution of marriage. The legal bond was dissolved 100%. The judge had signed off on every single term of our settlement agreement. Brad had moved out of state to Ohio, working a lower-level sales job to pay off his $80,000 in gambling debts. He was gone. He had no claim to my house, no claim to my business, and no claim to my future. I stared at the crisp black letters on the glowing screen. A year ago, I would have felt a surge of bitterness reading those words. I would have felt an overwhelming desire for revenge. I would have wanted him to suffer the exact same way he had made me suffer for a decade. Today, as the golden sunlight warmed my skin, I felt nothing of the sort. The anger had burned away, leaving behind clean, quiet ash. I felt no hatred toward Brad. I felt no lingering resentment. Resentment is a poison you drink while expecting the other person to suffer. I had poured that bitter poison out long ago. I realized my journey had brought me to a profound mindset shift. My past 10 years were not a tragic, ruined waste of my youth. My broken marriage was not a shame that defined me. It was a rigorous, painful classroom. It taught me how to find my own voice. It taught me that my love is a precious gift, not a free resource for others to drain. It taught me that setting firm, healthy boundaries is the highest form of self-respect. I had stopped being a helpless victim of my story. I had become the proud author of it. I looked down at my hands. The skin was healthy and smooth. My nails were neatly manicured. My fingers held the weight of my own independent success. My practical transformation was complete and undeniable. I was no longer the invisible, exhausted woman hiding behind baggy sweaters in a dark bedroom corner. I was a licensed certified management accountant running a thriving financial advisory firm on Logan Street in downtown Noblesville. My bank accounts were secure. My health was restored. My daughter was safe, happy, and thriving. I had built a fortress of financial and emotional stability with my own two hands. Chloe ran up the wooden porch steps, holding up a bright red tomato with a proud grin. "Can we make fresh tomato soup for dinner, Mommy?" "We certainly can, sweetie," I said, reaching out to gently smooth a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Helen leaned forward in her rocking chair, smiling brightly. "And I will bake a fresh loaf of sweet cornbread to go with it." "That sounds perfect, Grandma." Chloe cheered, sitting down on the top step beside my knees. I stood at the edge of the wooden porch. I rested my palm against the sturdy oak railing. The cool wood felt solid and reassuring under my skin. I looked out across my yard. The golden hour light bathed the garden beds, the tall maple trees, and the small terracotta pots on the windowsill in a brilliant, glowing warmth. The breeze blew past, rustling the yellow leaves above us. It felt as if the universe itself was giving us a standing ovation. I took a deep, slow breath. The cool, crisp autumn air filled my lungs completely. I exhaled quietly, releasing the very last trace of the past. I was no longer afraid of tomorrow. I was no longer carrying anyone else's debts, guilt, or selfish demands. I was standing firm on my own ground, rooted deeply in my own strength. Chloe looked up at me, her dark eyes shining in the soft sunlight. "Mommy, you look like you're glowing." I looked at my daughter. I looked at my mother. Then I looked out at the horizon, where the afternoon sun kissed the earth in a blaze of pure gold. I smiled. It was a smile of complete freedom, quiet peace, and unbroken pride. "I am glowing, Chloe," I whispered softly, "because we are finally home." I picked up the wicker basket of fresh flowers, took my daughter's hand in mine, and walked into the warm, bright house to begin the rest of my life. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we know we're walking this journey together. Hope to see you on the next page.